A pleasure to meet all at last. Welcome back once again to HJN Super Graphics. And for this instance, what I'm going to do is take advantage of something that's probably not all that worth of my time. And I don't exactly mean by the fact that the game that I'm about to talk about is sucky. No, it's a pretty unique specimen for what it is. But you probably know how I felt about Marvel. Yeah. Not very good, right? Yeah, especially considering that crappy cinematic universe. But we're going to take a turn away from that kind of BS and talk a bit about something that 2K created for us known as Marvel's Midnight Suns. Obviously, the title alone does mean it's not at all relative to the MCU, unlike some other games that we've seen that were Marvel related. But in all honesty, there's probably a lot that I will have to say about this game entirely. So, the thing is, Marvel's Midnight Suns does take on a pretty unique story front that seems on the more mythical case as opposed to the typical superhero regimen where it's about superheroes taking on supervillains. But, in all seriousness, the mythicality of Marvel's Midnight Suns does in fact allude to a rather unique and serene environment that we're more than likely to explore and enjoy in all positives and negatives alike. And I'm sure that we're going to have a lot to say about Marvel's Midnight Suns, whether good or bad intentions or not, but the way I see it, I'd see Midnight Suns as being something with potential. And for 2022 and 2023, depending on which version of the game that we got here, for me, it was 2023 when Midnight Suns came around into view, mostly because of the fact that that's when we got it on consoles, and I've had the game since then. But, of course, the main thing about this game that makes it very different from most others so far is that it's known as a turn-based tactic card game. Yeah, literally. According to many sources like Google, Steam, IGN, this game does in fact utilize card playing. Yeah, if you're probably not aware of that by now, it seems that playing cards and Marvel superheroes seem to go together all too well. I have remembered playing a few of those exact card games that were Marvel based or Marvel correlated, and this game, much less or more or less, by any means, does in fact focus on the same exact generalized perspective. The same playing style that we've seen over the years. Some games have taken advantage of this type of gameplay, while others have gone for a different approach through RPG and whatnot. And it is also true in this perspective that Midnight Suns has RPG elements in it. You can level up your characters, you can form bonds with them, you can interact with them in many different ways. There's dialogue trees that you can use, there's different side quests and tasks that you can accomplish. But the way I see it is that, well, I guess one thing we could get out of the way right away is the storyline. The storyline first takes place in which that a certain ritual is taking place amongst several Marvel supervillains that are inside, as well as a nearby army. But when that's all done, it's a pretty creepy scene to be seen. But later on, we are then introduced to some of the Marvel superheroes that most of us know about, like Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and eventually, others would join in as well. But in all seriousness though, Midnight Suns not only wrangles up the more familiar side of Marvel itself, but also gives us some of the more lesser known heroes out there. Like Blade, and even Ghost Rider comes along. And I will say right off the bat, Midnight Suns really does accomplish on the feats of bringing back some of the lesser known heroes into the full circle. So that way we actually have a good chance to see how well they do in a modern day perspective alongside a majority of the other Marvel superheroes. The Avengers nonetheless. And we know that there was an actual Avengers game which came out a few years prior, but unfortunately was pretty sucky in comparison. While Midnight Suns actually managed to do better treatment of them, but I will say it probably would have been a good opportunity to have some of the actors from the MCU come along and voice their respective characters, but I guess 2K didn't really want nothing to do with them. Probably for the best. In any case though, when the characters all come together, there's a certain character that also gets introduced. And believe it or not, they've been asleep for 3 centuries. Yeah, this character is basically, believe it or not, an in-game avatar that you create. Yeah. This character is simply dubbed the Hunter. Yeah, you don't exactly get to name it in any possible way, but you can customize your avatar to be whomever you want. Regardless of the appearance, the Hunter, in fact, known as the first customizable hero in Marvel's history. And I feel like that's another merit that does play pretty well in this scenario, because Midnight Suns not only does a good job at bringing back other superheroes that are not as well known or well represented in the franchise, but also the idea of having a more customized character, it really is a nice combo. And also the idea of card-based maneuvers, while it might not exactly be very innovative, or it might even be a bit redundant, but the reality of it is, it just seems for the fact that card-based games and Marvel happen to go well together. So I'm more than willing to accept that fact. But overall, with the story carrying on, with the Hunter teaming up with Marvel's superheroes and all that, eventually dubbing themselves the Midnight Suns, they're on a quest to, in fact, find out what is going on out there. There's many attacks that are taking place on Earth. And the main villain, of course, is known as Lilith. Chthon is basically probably the worst case scenario that she could ever come across. And Chthon, don't know if I'm saying that right, if resurrected, could probably mean the end for everything. So, yeah. But above all that, though, the heroes eventually gather up in a special place known as the Mansion. And this place in particular does serve as the main hub, or home base, pretty much, for where all operations are put together. And as the game goes by, the more missions you complete, the higher your level ups will go, the more items you pick up, the more things you can work with, the more services you can provide, and many other things happen to take place just as well. And more so, there's more characters that join along you as well. Captain Marvel comes along with you for the ride. Captain America does the same thing. Wolverine, even Spider-Man. And just another fact that Spider-Man, with the case of Tom Holland of course, had a trilogy. This was 2 years after Spider-Man No Way Home. Well, hope I never have to say that again. That's how bad it sucks. In any case though, all these heroes that you got here, all these resources that you pick up, and all of these different things can basically help turn the tide in battle and help prevent a majority of the various enemies, from Crossbones to Venom, and even to Wolverine's sworn enemy known as Sabretooth, at bay. And more so, you got the opportunity to stop Lilith from causing havoc. In my own experience of the game thus far, I feel like I've played up pretty well in this instance, but I will say that not everything about it is all sparkles and sunshine, because while it is true, card-based games don't exactly seem like a great idea. I mean, RPG could have been played up in any different way possible. Like, it could have been Final Fantasy oriented, where you have the group of heroes on one side of the screen and villains on the other side of the screen, and then a menu pops up from below showcasing the options that you can pick up. But I mean, that would be more akin to what the old school Final Fantasy games were like, as opposed to the new school stuff, which is more freeform and very fluent, if you will. So that way you can pretty much maneuver any way you want, move any way you want, defend or attack in any way you want, and even use your items in any way you want. So that way you don't have to really wait for anything to happen, as some people have found out to be kind of monotonous and a little irritating at times, for those who might not be very patient about it. But in the case of Marvel's Midnight Suns, having it follow in the same kind of generalized orientation of events that play out, where it's the player's turn, then the enemy's turn, then the player's turn again, And not to mention, you have only a limited supply of cards available. Each card does represent different attacks and abilities that the players' characters in the team can utilize to their advantage. And I will say that the cards that they chose out representing different attacks and advantages, as well as abilities and whatnot, healing and all that stuff, I'd say that they had a pretty good variety of different options for you to pick out. And what's more is that later on, if you do more business with the other heroes in the game, as the hunter of course, you can in fact allow for higher inventory, more cards to be played out, better attack, better defense, etc. There's a lot of ways that you can upgrade your characters and also have them fight better or defend better in the games themselves. In all the different missions that you go to, there's also a good variety of different selections that you can make. You basically teleport from the home base and the mansion itself through portals. Yeah, and these portals that you enter do allow you to directly enter the battle site as it is, where you can take on the many enemies that are out there. The enemies, of course, will use whatever they can to take you down. At first, it's pretty easy. In the first 10 hours of gameplay, I will say, I've had a pretty easy time on most parts because I have pre-planned for a lot of this stuff. And I've even done a lot of other tasks and side quests and even took on the opportunity to do some bonding time, if you will. Like we did some bird watching, we took a swim in the pool, we did some campfire stuff, video games, movies, a good variety of different activities that you can interact with the other players. And I will say that it's pretty funny to know that the hunter has been asleep for 300 years, but in my experience, she, as that's how I customize my hunter, the fact that she can play a video game better than some of the others, that's amazing. Imagine if a mummy from 2,000 years ago woke up and suddenly became good at Call of Duty. I mean, that'd be pretty awesome. Or what if a dinosaur suddenly happened to waltz into the room and play some Dragon Ball or something? Yeah, the whole idea of that stuff is just a pretty unique thing to explore with. Kind of sensual even. But in all seriousness, I will say that while there's a lot of positive merits in this, I will say that the negative merits, apart from the idea of it being turn-based and it being a card game in terms of attack and defense and whatnot, the main gist of going through battle with nothing but cards in hand doesn't really seem all that realistic. That'd be like if you pulled out a bunch of Magic the Gathering cards in front of an actual combat zone and then basically took out the one that says attack and then boom, you're attacking the enemy. I really doubt that they would do the same thing. You know, like if we were doing some kind of role play or LARPing session, maybe a world could exist where cards happen to be your only method of attack or defense. Basically weapons or shields in any way. Or they could basically be of any kind of assistance. Like I said though, there are some goods and bads about this game as there would be with any other games, but Midnight Suns at least is not MCU, and that's really the biggest thing that would have truly messed it up. I mean, there was all the talk about Guardians of the Galaxy and Marvel's Avengers, and there's even the recent Marvel Rivals, which also isn't necessarily MCU related, which I have to talk a bit more about that. But only if I'm able to get some time put on that game, as it is a free game nonetheless. Anyways though, in the case of Midnight Suns, I will say, I can give a commendable job on their efforts for bringing in a lot of characters, bringing in a lot of abilities, bringing in a good variety of different tasks to complete, and different ways to level up your characters. There's just a good amount of variables for you to work with, and it could keep you occupied for a long period of time. Similar to how other RPG games, like a good variety of the different Final Fantasy games we've gotten over the years, can also give us plenty of time to keep occupied. And I feel like that I'd probably have to finish up Marvel Midnight Suns because as soon as I got to Crossbones, I almost came completely unprepared because it was a multi-phased fight. Basically, when I defeated him on top of Avengers Tower, we then moved downwards to the street level where Crossbones is still alive, and unfortunately my characters all ended up dying. Yeah. I ended up having to just call it off at that point, and I never revisited it again since then. But maybe I might have to do that again, just for the sake of completion. Because I unfortunately don't quite know much more about the game after that point. So, like I said, I stopped at Crossbones, but I'm sure that if I could defeat him, then I can move on. Easy as that, right? So, of course, I am willing to give Marvel's Midnight Suns a nice big scoring, because apart from the problems that it had, and apart from the critiques that other people have given this game is rather commendable for a variety of different reasons. Very different from other games. And that's probably what makes it rather unique, contrary to what we've seen before. But for my scoring of Marvel's Midnight Suns, I'm willing to give it a good 8.0 out of 10.1 for what it is. And I'm more than glad that it's not MCU related. Otherwise, it would have been way lower. And Midnight Suns, Marvel Rivals, I'm sure that I might have to talk a bit more about Rivals since I've mentioned it, but that might have to wait for some other time, because there's plenty of other games that I'm going to have to talk about as well. So with that in mind, thank you for watching this piece, and I will see you guys again with more HJN Super Graphics. And make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.